Hello and welcome back to Impact Factor. I'm your host, Katie Van Aken, and this week we are talking about spotting PhDs in the wild, aka attending conferences. It's a pretty common thing for grad students to attend conferences, sometimes by themselves, a lot of times with professors. And if you're lucky, you get to go with, a handful of your lab mates or department colleagues, and it can be a really good time. And so I just wanted to point out some tips for kind of getting the most out of these events, and also using them as kind of a time to take advantage of some of the freedom and flexibility you have as a PhD student. So let's jump in. So what to expect? So from a very basic point of view, a research conference is a collection of often grad students, sometimes master students, professors, industry personnel, sometimes, basically all getting together in a city at a conference center to present their work. Now, it's been a little different, I think, over COVID. I haven't fully experienced it, but, a lot of virtual conferences, a lot of kind of streamed talks on Zoom and such things like that. But the original model is such that people would sort of come into a city from all over the world sometimes, and they would attend these conference talks. And a general conference talk is typically less than 15 minutes. I've been to some conferences where it's 12 minutes, some that are 10, leaving enough time for questions. But, in general, they try and cycle people through very quickly, because in your symposium or your topical section, they want to get a bunch of talks in. Then there's usually a break, and then more talks and a break. And so, keeping it short and sweet is really important. And we're gonna have an episode coming up about giving talks and sort of some best practices there, because I think it's a really valuable skill set. And conference talks just one example of the many times you're going to be asked to talk about your research. So, spoiler there. But so moving on. So let's say you are you're submitting to a conference. You can either submit for a talk or a poster in most cases. Often the talks are typically more prestigious, I guess. Professors are given invited talks. There's usually a keynote talk. And then, if you have a pretty high profile paper or something, you may also be accepted as a talk in a related symposium. The benefit of submitting and also if you don't get accepted for a talk, you'll often get accepted for a poster. So sometimes it doesn't hurt just to apply for a talk, knowing that you'll get a poster likely if you don't. The nice thing about having a poster, though, is there are often best poster awards, and this can be, kind of nice. They're pretty hard to get sometimes in these big conferences where there's tons and tons of posters, but many of the conferences I've been to, every night has a different poster session, and there's, maybe 5 poster award winners, and they have different criteria, and sometimes you're asked to stand by your poster and go over it with the judges. My experience is that some conferences don't have you in the room while the judges are walking around, so therefore the message that your poster portrays without being explained is 10 times more important. But so that can be fun, and the poster awards usually come with a cash prize, and I have some very fond memories of people in my group winning poster session prizes, and then, the footing the bill at the bar after the poster session that day, which is really kind of is a fun memory. And I myself have won a few poster sessions. Actually, I was my very first conference I went to as a first year PhD student. I was a second author on a paper, and we won the best poster award, which was really cool. And I split the prize with the main PhD student on the project. And then my very last conference I attended, I also won the best poster award as a sole PhD. It was sort of a poster about my thesis, and it was very full circle, and it felt very very cute. Okay, so posters and talks. So those are the core of the research conference, and the idea is to share your work and to collaborate and also see what's going on. So what you can also do is obviously attend these things, and so typically a schedule is posted ahead of time for each day. These days, I think most conferences have a mobile app that you can download and see all the sessions. Ideally, they're updated with cancellations and time changes, which does happen. And it sort of lets you put your schedule together ahead of time. I remember my first couple conferences, I was extremely overwhelmed by all of the concurrent, topical sessions going on, and how I was basically like, how was I supposed to figure out where I needed to be at all times if I wanted to get the most out of this conference? And, first tip here is don't put pressure on yourself to make sure you attend every single thing. You should prioritize the things that are the most relevant to your work, or also some things that are just the most interesting to you. I think it's really important to kind of branch out of your research and attend a tangentially related or completely unrelated topical session, just to kind of get the sense for what else is going on out there, and maybe it will spark some ideas or collaborations, which is one of the benefits of conferences to begin with. So you can definitely make your schedule or start to make your schedule ahead of time. A lot of the times we would arrive the night before and register and get the schedule, and then spend that night kind of mapping out some highlights and things that we wanted to hit. And it's also okay to come in and out of symposiums. If there's a specific talk you want to see, maybe support a friend, you can sort of sneak in the middle, hang out in the back, watch them speak, and then sneak out and go back to whatever other topic you were listening to. So there's definitely flexibility, and the goal is, everybody's goal there is to get as much out of the week of talks and stuff that they can. Something else I wanted to talk about was location. I think I mentioned before that there are some advisors who are really big on traveling to conferences, and some that don't really do it as much, and that's okay. Either way is fine. But sometimes it's up to you to sort of spearhead the conversation about there's this really cool conference and I want to go. And so just an advice is to make sure you go to a cool location. I mean, you don't have to go to a cool location, obviously, but conferences are a great opportunity to kind of visit a new and interesting city, and give yourself maybe an extra day at the end of the conference to see some things in the city and make some good memories. I was lucky. My advisor was very big on conferences. I went to some with half my research group. I went to some with one other student. I went to some by myself. But I went to places like Hawaii, Cancun, Poland, London, France, Italy. And then, in the US, I went to Boston a bunch of times, San Francisco, and Phoenix, among others. And, I got to see these cities. I'm really familiar with some of Boston. I'm really familiar with Boston, mostly because I went there every fall, for 5 years for the same conference. But yeah, I mean, when we went to Hawaii, there was a few of us there, and we took a few days after the conference ended, on our own dime, of course, and we did things like snorkeling, and we took surf lessons, and we really sort of, because when are you going to be in Hawaii again? So it it was a really good opportunity to kind of explore this new place, and come back to lab kind of refreshed and having had a little mini vacation. The other thing too is, sometimes people think of conferences as a vacation, and maybe some people feel that way. Certainly if you have a lot of responsibilities at home, it may feel like a vacation. It always felt for me as it was exhausting. It was early mornings, late nights, and then if you also add into that, an extra day or two to see the city, by the time you get home, you're pretty exhausted. But, I wouldn't have done it any other way because I really got a lot out of the conference, and there's plenty of things to learn and attend, and that's what's kind of wears you down sometimes. So I also wanted to mention, outside of the whole, research talks and presentations, there's often a lot of like special sessions that you sort of have to find in the schedule. And these can be really useful too. Sometimes they're, free breakfasts, which doesn't suck. And you just have to listen to someone talk. But sometimes the topics are interesting. I remember going to a bunch of breakfasts that were focused on, women in science. And so it was always kind of a high level woman in industry science position who was talking about certain topics, and I always found that interesting. And it's also a great networking opportunity because you often get, put at a table with random other women, and sometimes you make real connections, and that's pretty cool. So free breakfasts and other special sessions. There's often some sessions just for grad students. Definitely go to those. It's often awkward because people don't know each other, but if you can sort of force yourself to talk and break the ice with some of these other grad students, sometimes you can talk about a collaboration or find out that they live in the same city and go to a different school, and so that's pretty cool too. And there's often lots of free food. There's a theme here is that there's a lot of events that also have free food, so at the very least, if you don't get anything out of it, you get to eat something and often drink something too. And along those lines, there's often a lot of events that involve some adult beverages, and a lot of times it's free, and that's kind of the fun stuff you can enjoy is over a glass of wine, talking some science, but definitely take advantage of all of those extra events that the conference puts on, because you can get a lot out of it. At the very least, some food and drinks. Okay, so let's talk about networking. So a lot of times, students feel like they are going to conferences, and the goal there is to network, is to make connections and visit with either people they do collaborate with or to meet new people to collaborate with. And, if they're not doing that, they're not taking advantage of the conference. And also, how do they do that, right? This can be very stressful. Networking is not super interesting or easy. And it's also, definitely not the one of the things that PhDs in science are that good at. So here's some tips, right? So let's say you want to talk to a professor who you just saw their talk, right? Well, you may feel intimidated because you may feel like, well, they're this like big deal in the field and there's no way they're going to want to talk to me. Let me assure you that professors are very well known for loving to talk about their work, and B, love to talk about their work, like their work, right? So what I mean there is you don't have to feel intimidated by the conversation, especially if you're going to start the conversation by expressing how, well read you are on their work and how much you appreciate it and how much you think it's really cool and you learn from it. And, they're going to just start talking. They're going to be like, yes, we're working on this and it's very cool. And did you come to my talk? And basically the conversation will just come out of nowhere because they love to talk about their work and you are starting this conversation by asking them about their work. So that is the easiest way to get a conversation going with a professor. And who knows what comes out of it. I mean, sometimes you'll just have that conversation and then you'll sort of walk away. Maybe you learned something, maybe you didn't. It's always a good idea to kind of come back to that professor, maybe at a different conference, and say, I've been following you since we talked in Boston, and, this study was really cool. Because you never know. I mean, down the line in 5 years when you graduate, you might be interested in doing a postdoc in their lab, or there might be a collaboration you can start with their group. So that's a good way to start. And I know the professors seem intimidating because, they get off the stage from their talk and they're getting swarmed by people. But, take your time and really, find your moment. And like I said, they do not hate when people come up to them, especially students who are, quote, impressed with their work and their group's work, because honestly, they love that. I was going to say something else about networking. Right, so make sure you keep touching base. Collaborations. I don't know. Oh, I remember now. The other thing too is if you're there with your professor and your professor is well connected with other PIs, other professors, my experience was during the poster session when it's sort of like a free-for-all where everyone's walking around. If I hung a little bit close to my advisor, he would introduce me to a lot of professors as we walked by them. And that was a nice way to sort of break the ice. And then later on in the week, if I saw them, I could say hi and talk to them more intently. But it never hurts to have someone make that connection for you. And if your professor's not there, you can find someone else to do that. And I don't think it's not looked down upon at all. I think it's great to do whatever you can to network to make these connections. Okay, and finally, don't miss out on the fun stuff. I sort of mentioned this already, but there's the free food and the free drinks and seeing the city or seeing the location that you're at. But in addition to some of those things, I think some of the fun components of attending conferences is also just the memories that are made. I have a lot of memories of funny things that have happened at conferences. I'll tell you a quick story. So we were at a conference in Boston with the majority of my research group, and my research group was large. So, every time I turned around, I was walking by someone I knew, which was really cool. And we had a couple students who were back at home in the lab working, and we did research. A lot of us did research on energy storage, and so one of our largest piece of equipment that we worked with regularly was a glove box. And a glove box is a environmentally contained chamber where the pressure and temperature maybe are monitored and kept at a certain level so that there's no moisture and the environment can be good for putting together things like battery cells and using things that are like electrolytes that will otherwise evaporate in regular air. So it was really important that we kept this glove box very well put together. So I think the context here is that the conference was over the week of April Fools. And so we were thinking of a way we could prank someone in our group, and the thing we came up with was that one of the students in our group was also a high user of the glove box, as was I. And so we decided that we would tell him that that one of the students who was still at the lab punctured the glove, and everything inside was ruined. The environment was tainted, and now everything was trash. And so we did that. I think we pulled off the messaging pretty well because he definitely believed it. But what happened was, while we expected him to be like, "Oh my God," and like flip out, he was very reasonable about it. He was like, "Okay, let's take a step back. How can we use this to our advantage? Let's start fresh. Let's do a full clean of the inside. Let's throw out everything that's old, and we can just sort of take this opportunity and refresh everything." So my postdoc and I, who were the ones doing the prank, we were like, well, this is awkward now because we're going to be like, well, actually, it's fine. But anyway, I'll always have this memory, and it's not a great story. I realize now after telling it that we did this, and that particular year was fun because we would be walking to different talks, and I would run into people that I knew, and at the poster sessions, my advisor was introducing us to all kinds of people, and it was one of the best experiences of my grad school career. So always a good time, and always fun to go out afterwards and have some drinks with your friends, people you just met, and make some memories. And we still tell stories about conferences and some of the shenanigans we got up to, and some good stories. And when I have those people on the podcast, we'll revisit some of those because they're pretty good stories. All right, so I think that's it for this week. I'm sure there's more conference-related advice, but hopefully it'll come up in future topics. Thanks so much to everyone who continues to listen. Remember to follow us on Instagram at Impact Factor Pod. We have episode announcements and updates coming there. And as fall approaches, I just wanted to say good luck to those returning from vacation or starting a new semester, and especially to those who are attending orientation for your first year as a PhD student. And with that, have a great week.